All right, so Johannesburg. You've really outdone yourself this time. We've got travel websites, we've got some deep dives into history, even some paleontology stuff.
Wow, that is quite a mix.
Yeah, it's like you're looking for something more than just a quick vacation,
It
right?
seems that way. And they've picked a really fascinating place to explore. Johannesburg is, well, it's more than just a city. It's a place where you've got history, you've got nature, and you've got modern life all kind of smashing together in this one place.
Okay, so I see you've been doing a little flight and hotel research on FlightNHotels.com.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like they've got some pretty good deals going on.
Oh, yeah. Getting there is just the first step. Johannesburg isn't the kind of place you just visit. You've got to experience it. And that experience starts with understanding its roots.
Right, and speaking of roots, the sources mention Johannesburg being built on gold. Literally. I mean, like, the city wouldn't even exist without the gold rush.
Exactly. And it's not just the historical footnote or anything. The gold rush shaped the city's layout. It's like, it shaped the economy, even its social dynamics. It's like the echoes of that gold fever are still kind of pulsing through Johannesburg's veins.
Yeah, I'm picturing, like, prospectors with pickaxes covered in dust, and suddenly there's this theme park, Gold Reef City, right there in the middle of it all. It's gotta be wild seeing that against the backdrop of historical spots like those old prisons.
It's a stark reminder that Johannesburg doesn't shy away from its past, It's woven into the fabric of the city, and that's never more apparent than when you visit places like the Apartheid Museum in Constitution Hill.
Yeah, those really stood out to me too. It's one thing to just read about apartheid, but to actually, like, be in the spaces where those laws were enforced, where people fought for their freedom, that's gotta be an incredibly powerful experience.
Yeah, what's striking is that these aren't just somber memorials or something. They're places that encourage dialogue, and reflection. They challenge visitors to grapple with, like, the complexities of history and how it continues to shape South Africa today.
Okay, so we've got this intense historical backdrop, but then I'm also seeing these photos of this, like, lush green oasis, the Walter Sisulu National Botanical Garden, waterfalls, indigenous plants. It's like a hidden paradise.
It's one of the many surprises Johannesburg has to offer.
Right.
This isn't just a concrete jungle, You've got these pockets of tranquility kind of woven into the urban landscape, and they offer a completely different perspective on the city.
It's like Johannesburg is constantly playing with your expectations. We've got sources mentioning this edgy street art in Johannesburg Lane, but then you also got this beautifully preserved Victorian mansion, Linfield House.
It makes you wonder, what kind of experience are you looking for in Johannesburg? Do you crave that raw energy of street art? Or are you drawn to the quiet elegance of a bygone era? The city caters to both, and that's what makes it so intriguing.
I think I know what you're going to say, but let's be honest here. I have a hunch you're particularly interested in the Cradle of Humankind. I mean, that's not something you find on every travel itinerary.
It's not just a tourist attraction. It's a journey back to our origins.
Yeah.
Think about it. You can stand in the Sterkfontein Caves, where Mrs. Pliss, an Australopithecus africana skull, estimated to be over 2 million years old, was discovered. There's a direct link to our ancient past.
Wow, 2 million years. I bet standing in those caves makes you feel pretty insignificant. Okay, so we've got ancient history covered, but then there's also this ultra-modern side to Johannesburg with places like Sandton City and Nelson Mandela Square. It's like stepping into a different world.
And that's the paradox of Johannesburg. You've got this gleaming, sophisticated exterior, and then bubbling beneath the surface, there's this incredible underground scene. It's a city of contrasts and contradictions.
So we've got these luxurious malls, but we've also got this vibrant underground music and art scene. It's making me think about those old speakeasies during Prohibition. Hidden gems where the real action is happening.
Exactly. And speaking of hidden gems, the Orbit Jazz Club is a perfect example. It's not flashy or pretentious, but it's where you'll find some of the most talented musicians in the city just pouring their hearts out on stage.
So we've got these incredible jazz clubs hidden away, but the sources also mention a whole district dedicated to this kind of energy, the Meboning Precinct. It sounds like the place to be for art, food, and just that late-night buzz.
Yeah, the Moboni is a perfect example of Johannesburg's constant evolution. It used to be like a neglected industrial area, and now it's this vibrant hub of creativity, attracting artists, entrepreneurs, anyone who wants to experience the pulse of the city.
You know, it's funny. We started talking about gold being the heart of Johannesburg, but it seems like there's this other kind of gold now, this like creative energy that's driving the city forward.
Yeah. It's like the city itself is this living organism, constantly adapting and reinventing itself. And that's what makes it so exciting. It's not stuck in the past. It's embracing the future while acknowledging its history.
Yeah. It's making me think about those time-lapse videos you see of cities, like, growing and changing over decades. Except in Johannesburg, it feels like that time-lapse is happening in real time.
And that pace of change can be exhilarating, but also challenging.
Yeah.
How do you preserve the heritage of a place that's constantly evolving? It's a question Johannesburg is grappling with.
Okay, so let's try to unpack all of this for our listener. We've got this layered history from the gold rush to apartheid and beyond. We've got pockets of nature tucked away amidst the urban sprawl. And then there's this, like, electrifying energy coming from the art, music, and entrepreneurial scene. It's a lot to take in.
It is. And it's all connected. Like the weight of history informs the creative expression of the present. The challenges of the past fuel the drive for innovation in the future. It's like each layer we've uncovered just adds to the richness and complexity of the tapestry that is Johannesburg.
Out of everything we've talked about so far, what's really resonating with you? What's piqued your curiosity the most about all this?
Honestly, it's that feeling of possibility that just permeates the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, Johannesburg has its share of problems, just like any major metropolis. But there's also this undeniable sense of hope, a belief that things can change, that progress can be made.
And that's reflected in everything from, like, the redevelopment of areas like Meboning to the art that's popping up on the streets, right? It's like a city that's refusing to be defined by its past.
Exactly. And that refusal to be pigeonholed, that willingness to embrace the messiness of it all, that's what makes Johannesburg so compelling.
Yeah, it's making me think about all those little details we've uncovered, like, that Mrs. Plus skull. It's not just a fossil, it's like a window into millions of years of history. Right there in Johannesburg. And then you've got those hidden jazz clubs where you can hear the city's soul pouring out through music. It's those unexpected moments that really bring a place to life.
Those are the moments that make a journey truly memorable. And I think for someone like you, someone who's clearly interested more than just checking tourist attractions off a list, Johannesburg has a lot to offer.
Okay, so we've talked about all these layers, the history, the nature, that modern pulse. But how does all of that translate to actually experiencing Johannesburg? What should our listener keep in mind when they're planning their trip?
I'd say flexibility is key. Johannesburg isn't a city you can plan down to the minute. It's a city that demands you be open to the unexpected, to embrace detours and, serendipitous discoveries.
So ditch the rigid itinerary and just wander. That's my kind of travel style. But seriously, are there any practical tips you'd offer based on all this information we've been discussing?
Well, given your interest in history, I'd say make sure you dedicate ample time to the Apartheid Museum and Constitution Hill. Those are places that deserve a few hours each, not just a quick walkthrough.
Those definitely sound like places you need to soak in, not just glance at.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing those botanical gardens are worth a visit too, right? Especially after all that heavy history.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of simply walking the streets. Get lost in the different neighborhoods, soak up the energy, chat with locals, try the street food. Those everyday encounters are what will truly make you feel connected to the city.
It's almost like the city itself is a giant open-air museum, and every corner you turn reveals a new exhibit.
And each exhibit tells a story, whether it's, the grand narrative of history or the small personal stories of the people who call Johannesburg home.
So instead of approaching it like a checklist, it's more about being present, being open, and just letting the city guide you.
Exactly. And maybe even getting a little bit lost along the way, because that's often where the most interesting discoveries are made.
Okay, so we've got the history, we've got the nature, and the let's get lost in the streets vibe. But what about that underground scene we keep teasing? I'm ready to find some of those hidden gems.
We mentioned Meboing. That's definitely a good starting point. It's like a microcosm of Johannesburg's creative spirit. You've got art galleries, studios, live music venues, restaurants with, experimental menus. It's all about pushing boundaries.
Sounds like my kind of place, but is it one of those scenes where, you have to know the right people to find the coolest spots?
Not at all. Meboing is all about inclusivity. It's a place where artists, entrepreneurs, everyday people, they all come together to create something new and exciting. Just wander around, see what catches your eye, and don't be afraid to, strike up conversations.
I'm picturing those old black and white photos of New York's Greenwich Village in the 50s with poets and musicians hanging out in cafes. bouncing ideas off each other. It's got that kind of energy, right?
There's definitely a similar vibe, but Mboning is uniquely Johannesburg. It's infused with the city's history, its diversity, and its like relentless drive to create something new.
Okay, so I'm sold on Mabonung, but what about those hidden jazz clubs? The sources mentioned the Orbit. Is that the real deal?
The Orbit is a Johannesburg institution. It's not fancy, but it's got soul. You'll find some of the most talented jazz musicians in South Africa gracing that stage. And the crowd is just as passionate as the performers. It's a real community.
Oh, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It's like those, smoky, dimly lit jazz clubs you see in movies where the music just washes over you and you lose yourself in the moment. Okay, so we've got the history, we've got nature, art, music. Is there anything else Johannesburg has up its sleeve?
Well, you haven't experienced Johannesburg until you've tasted it. The city's food scene is as diverse and vibrant as its culture. You can find everything from, traditional South African cuisine to cutting-edge fusion dishes. And don't even get me started on the coffee culture.
You have officially convinced me. I am booking my ticket to Johannesburg. But before I do, any last words of wisdom for our listener?
Just remember, Johannesburg is a city that will challenge you, it'll surprise you, and ultimately it'll leave a lasting impression. Go with an open mind, a curious spirit, and a willingness to embrace the unexpected, and most importantly, have fun.
Well said. And that wraps up our deep dive into Johannesburg. We hope this has given you a taste of what this incredible city has to offer. Now it's your turn to explore it for yourself. Safe travels.